Jeremy, your reign of terror's ended.
Give us McCauley, you stupid
I got eyes on Ron. Go secure McCauley.
You got it. Don't worry, I got you, little boy. You'll be home alone no more. Get him behind you. Stay behind me, little boy.
Your reign of terror's over, Ron Jeremy.
You're gonna get it now. You're going down. Chili! No!
McCauley, why?
Du weißt immer noch nicht, wer ich bin, oder?
What do you mean?
Macaulay Culkin.
Maybe Joseph Stalin.
Genug Zeit für deinen Untergang.
The combat roll, Mike. Oh, I'm stupid.
Ron Jeremy. Porn is cringe.
It worked! Hey, buddy, we gotta get you out of here.
Du hast immer noch nicht gefunden. Sobald ich meinen Körper zu einem neuen Klon transferiert habe, wirst du atomares Feuer schmecken.
Mike, we got a warrant, Task Force 69, about the nuclear blast. We only have one chance to transmit.
No place to go out like the now. I'm glad to die with you.
Task Force 69. Macaulay Culkin is maybe Joseph Stalin.
We're going to be talking about the AK-105. In many ways, the AK-105 is to the AK-74M what the Mark 18 is to the M4. We'll be talking about that and many more things on what I believe to be one of the most versatile and underlooked AK variants that is currently out there. So make sure that you stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, the biggest sponsor of the channel is Brennell's. We want to give a big thank you to them. Very base. Thank you, guys. Now, this video is sponsored by Zydax Computers. Go check them out. They are sponsoring our brand new gaming channel, which is launching very soon. A big thank you to them. They actually make cool computers. And, of course, Groove Belts. Go check those guys out. They are making great stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, my often forgotten, but most certainly not by me, AK-12s, welcome to the channel. Today, we talk about a very interesting rifle, and that is the AK-105. So, kind of getting into it a little bit here. Before we really talk about the rifle, we have to give credit where credit is due. So first off, our full disclosures, as we always do. This particular AK-105 is completely paid for by me. I didn't get any discounts or anything like that. Everything that has gone on this weapon was bought and paid for by me, just as a quick note. This ended up being a very expensive build. No expenses were spared in the building of this to try to get it as correct as possible as far as the main parts are concerned. Now, it was all built by Jim Fuller out of Fuller, Phoenix. I've said it before. I do believe that Jim Fuller is, without a doubt, the best custom AK builder in the world. I don't think there's any, I don't think there's anybody really better. Now, there are a lot of people who are really good or really close to him, but I think Jim's the best. Maybe I'm biased. Who knows? But in any case, we got to give credit where credit is due for that. Just a beautiful build. This is built on an ISMASH 88 kit. And for all intents and purposes, it is about as close as you can get without having a factory sample. Now, it should be noted when it comes to the AK-105 that I do have a little bit of familiarization with the actual AK-105 as it comes from the factory. So we'll definitely be talking about that as we go through this review. Now, the AK-105, if you don't know what the AK-105 is, the AK-105 is a 5.45 by 39 semi-automatic gas-operated long-stroke piston-driven weapon that is magazine-fed, and it, of course, owes its lineage to the AK-74M or to the AK-100 series, and prior to that, to the AKM and AK-47. Now, it should be noted also that the AK-105 is a part of the AK-100 series, which was made for export by Russia and then ended up being picked up by quite a few different special operation units within Russia's special operations world. In addition to the 5.56 version of this, the 102 being picked up by multiple different units in different countries. 5.45 isn't as popular outside of Russia as 5.56 is, for example. So this has been used quite a bit, and I think what's really interesting about the AK-105 is that much like the Mark 18, the AK-105 kind of just ended up following a path of least resistance. And what I mean by that is if we look at something like the Mark 18, we'll pop up a little picture of a Mark 18 Mod 0. So you have the M4 carbine, and I understand I am oversimplifying quite a bit, but you have the M4 carbine, and essentially on the M4 carbine, if you were to cut that barrel as short as possible without getting into the gas system. And why this is important is, of course, we have shorter gas systems, or as we begin to shorten different parts of the weapon, that increases the amount of production costs because, of course, you have to tool up for completely new parts. So by simply cutting down the barrel on an M4 and opening up the gas port, we have a CQB type weapon. Now, it just so happened that for the M4, the shortest we could get it all the way on that carbine length gas system was 10.3 inches. And of course, the versatile Mark 18 was born. Now, on the AK world, of course, everyone knows and loves the Krink. We'll put the little picture of the Krink up right here. The Krink did serve for a long time, but it's found to be lacking in many ways. And also, it had a lot of proprietary parts that had to be built out. This increased production costs quite a bit. And any country wants to save money. So when the AK-105 was designed, it was just a simple fix. They took a AK-100 series, so like an AK-74M. The barrel was cut down as short as it could be, i.e. to the gas block, and we had our CQB type weapon. It just so happened that for the AK series, as short as I could get it was 12.4. Now, in my opinion, that ended up being a wonderful barrel length for an all-around fighting carbine. It just so happened that, as Providence would have it, that was the perfect length. And a lot of my AR guys know that 12.5s are a great barrel length, and it certainly stands true for the 5.45 as well, which is in many ways very similar to 5.56. So let's go ahead and let's show you what I mean by that. So if we take, I don't have a 100 series on me that is not modified, so we have an AKM right here, roughly the same. So you have to understand that the gas block right here would be straight up and down, but you can see the length of it right there. Now it's a little bit harder to see because we have a lot of furniture on this particular 105, but if we go ahead and we match those guys up, you can see that right where that gas block ends is where we'd end up cutting that to get our CQB type weapon. And born, we have the AK-105. So we're going to talk about this simple weapon, this very reliable weapon. You guys have seen it on the channel quite a bit. Now, before we get into it, I think it's really interesting about the AK-105 is at that 12.5 length, and this is also true for ARs, you really don't lose that much velocity. So we'll show our chronograph right here when we were working through the AK-105, but you really do retain quite a bit of velocity, and that makes this a very interesting fighting rifle. Okay, we're out on the range now. We're going to be chronoing the AK-105. Before we do that, we're going to set our baseline with a 74 right here. We have the PSA AK-74. So that will give us the speed of the round out of the full-size weapon, and then we can compare that with the AK-105. So we'll go ahead and start. We have Keely from Long Range with the Lilies out here to run the chrono. Thank you, Keely.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go ahead and let's run this.
Same spot?
Yep.
All right, you're good to go.
All right. 27.69. 28.11, 28.31, 27.70, 28.91, 2800. Well, Russian ammo, a lot of variability, par for the course, but in any case, we'll go ahead and we'll check that against the 105. Hey, Keely, what's the general average, I guess, on that guy?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you have an extreme spread of 121.
Good, that's good for accuracy, right?
And your standard deviation is 45.3.
All right. Well, how wonderful. Go and check that against the 105.
Are you good to go?
All right.
You know, not as much of a drop as I would have thought. It was actually pretty good. 545. Who would have thought? What's our average?
So your ES here, so your average is 2687. Your extreme spread was 88.
Okay.
And your standard deviation was 38.7. So we can compare it to the other one.
Yeah.
That was a 5-round group. This is a 6-round group. So this is a more averaging ammo.
Well, that's interesting. So it looks like we had about 120 feet per second drop between the two, approximately.
Yeah. I think that you were hitting in the 2600s. So
Yeah.
this is 2687. And this one's 2812, so that one's a lot faster.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, longer barrel. Certainly not as much of a drop in feet per second as you would have seen with 5.56 or something like that. So it's encouraging. That definitely explains why a lot of people have been preferring the 12.4 and 5.45 and noting its performance, because it certainly still has enough speed to be terminally effective at those distances for those fighting carbines. So hope you guys like that little demonstration. We're going to go ahead and get back into the black screen room. Now, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and do what we always do, and we're going to go tip to butt on this bad guy, and we're going to talk about what makes this weapon what it is. So if we pop up a picture of the normal AK-105 as it comes from the factory, you will notice that there is one legacy part from the crank-off. Now, a lot of people are asking, what is the booster? What is the point of it? Well, you guys know if we mount a suppressor to a weapon, we massively increase the amount of back pressure. Now, this could be a good or a bad thing. Now, in the case of a weapon like this, we have a very short dwell time. So essentially what dwell time is, I'm going to be simplifying it quite a bit. After the bullet passes the gas port on the weapon, you have that pressurized gas behind the slug as it's traveling down the barrel. So before the round exits the barrel, and while that gas is still in contact with the gas port and flowing through the gas port, because once that slug unplugs from the barrel, of course, that pressure rapidly drops. So that dwell time is the amount of time that round is past the gas port and that gas is pressurized in the gas port before it leaves the barrel. So of course, on a weapon like a AKM, like we have right here, we of course have a longer dwell time because the round has to go all the way down here while all that gas is still flowing back there. It has a lot of gas in order to power the weapon. Compared to the 105, we have a lot less dwell time because right past the gas block, that barrel ends. So what a booster is doing is essentially you have a baffle in there, essentially, that's increasing the pressure to ensure that the weapon's going to cycle. Now, it should be noted that the AK-105 does run fine without a booster. However, the booster is an Arctic type consideration, and I do want to give a big thank you to @Linden's with 2 N's. He is what I would consider a small arms, Soviet arms expert, and I definitely did consult with him, as well as Brandon Herrera, of course. Big thank you to both you guys, and Jim Fuller, and of course AK Operators Union. Nothing that I do is in a bubble, right? I regularly reach out to these guys, so we have to give credit where credit is due, and a big thank you to all those gentlemen for taking the time to help me with this particular video. Now, in any case, that booster is just making sure that this weapon is going to work in Arctic conditions. Now, these boosters have, of course, been supplemented by designs with better flash suppression. So right here, we have a 4-piece flash hider right here, and it is now depending on the flash hider that you have. Some of these will have that ability to increase the back pressure if they have a little baffle in them. Some of them won't. But in any case, these work really, really well at hiding flash. Now, as with everything that is Russian, nothing is subtle, and these are huge. I mean, compare that to American-type flash hiders. This is a large design, but that being said, they do work incredibly well, so you have to say that about the Russians. So we have our muzzle device right here, wonderfully made. This is pretty typical of what you see being used by multiple different special operations forces from Russia all throughout the world. So that's why I think this is a really interesting design. And it is really interesting also, speaking of which, that so many different special operations groups within the Russian sphere of influence have adopted this weapon. They found it to be so light and handy and to still have that oomph and that power behind it because the barrel length is still at an appropriate length to deliver quite a lot of feet per second on those slugs to ensure that they impact with enough force to have that incapacitation value. So I've always found it very interesting that they've adopted this after handling both a 74 that's outfitted with everything necessary for, making a fighting gun. You understand why a lot of them have run over to the 105. It is just, as far as an AK goes, a much more balanced weapon. Now, moving back from our flash hider right here, we of course have the barrel. So the barrel's 12.4 inches. Of course, the ones from the Russian factory are extremely well made. Now, what I think is really interesting is a lot of people say that the AK is not a very accurate weapon system. And I'm not going to say what I typically say, which is that the weapon typically surpasses the shooter as far as accuracy. Because certainly I think in many ways, weapons like the AR platform and stuff are a little bit more accurate as far as like base accuracy. But I would consider the AK-105 or the AK-74M to be about maybe a sub 2 MOA gun, somewhere right around there. And what makes it difficult is we don't have a lot of really good ammunition to test this ammunition as well as we do with an AR. With an AR, we of course have Black Hills and all this great ammunition. We have hand-loaded ammunition. You don't see so much of that in the 5.45 world, so it's much harder to truly test the accuracy of these weapons. But I would say with most of the ammunition that we're using, we're looking at about a 2 MOA gun, which is wonderful. Now, I should also note that on this particular weapon with the Elk Inspector on there, I had this thing zeroed. I did about a 40-yard battle zero on it, and I found it to be pretty true out to about 300. I did a little bit of adjustment pass there, got it dialed on, and shots well out to 500 were quite easy, and very much so on par with the AK-74M. Of course, there is a little loss between those with the shorter barrel length, but I find this to be a very appropriate weapon for the typical engagement distances that you're seeing with carbines of this type. So again, everything's a Met TC for my Army people out there. Essentially, the situation is going to dictate what gear you want, but in most cases, I believe that the AK-105 certainly fills those roles as far as its capabilities are concerned. Now, from there, of course, the gas system on the 105 is essentially the same as what you're seeing on the typical 74M. This, of course, is a good thing as it streamlines production costs. What's really interesting about the 105 is how good it feels. The 5.45, the recoil impulse is a little less sharp and a little bit more gentle. Now, the 5.45 doesn't quite have quite as much ass behind it as a 5.56 does, but it has more than enough for what it needs to do. So it's always a real pleasure to shoot the 105, and I should note that, of course, this particular one built by Jim Fuller is phenomenally gassed. But even for the production models that I've fired of the AK-105 have been very well gassed, despite being what you'd call combat gas. And if you haven't fired an AK before, it's certainly a different feeling compared to an AR. The AK, you can definitely feel that bolt carrier, that entire mass cycling back and forth, and you can feel that kind of those vibrations going through your cheekbone as you're firing it. Compared to the AR, it's a little bit smoother. Sometimes you get that little bit of that spring twang as you're firing, but not so much with the AK. The AK is a very chonky feeling every time you pull the trigger. And in many ways, feels a little bit slower, a little bit more sluggish, just due to the fact of how much mass is moving with it. But that mass also plays to its benefit, and that bolt carrier speed also plays to its benefit. Because as we've seen, if you haven't already, the ice test video that we did, this AK-105 in particular was one of the best weapons that we tested. And indeed, I believe that the 74 would have probably done maybe a little bit better. But these weapons are just phenomenal in terms of how they're designed to handle a lot of the adverse conditions that you can expect to see throughout the world. Now, moving on to the most obvious part of the 105 that you're probably asking about right now, and that is a handguard, because this obviously does not look like a factory. So the question is, why do I have it configured that way? Well, this is from Zenitco. And if you're not familiar with them, they make furniture, suppressors, tons of different things for the Russian military and for the civilian sector as well. You can buy these. And essentially, the Zenitco rails are to the AK as to what the Daniel Defense Block 2 rails were for the M4. Essentially a system to allow for increased accuracy, to allow for better cooling of the weapon, to increase its service life's longevity, and that all stems from the fact that the Handguard acts as a heat sink and a way for the heat then to dissipate more easily compared to what you'd see in earlier variations of the AK world. So this handguard just ended up being an absolute godsend when it came to the AK world, as well as allowing you to add on your IR lasers and lights for night vision work, your lights further out to ensure you don't get as much shadow off your muzzle devices in your rifle. These have truly modernized the AK platform. We'll talk more about it right here, but these are absolutely incredible. So the Zenitco, some older variations as well as these newer variations, this is a Sport 1 rail, have been used in the Russian special operations world quite a bit because they're just so well designed and they're very robust and very strong. And they are directly interfaced into the AK itself. Now, one thing to note as well is going back from there, this is directly attached to the rail for our dust cover mount. Now, I get a lot of questions about this. Is this hold 0, etc.? Most of your older dust cover mounts don't, but in the case of this one, interfacing off the Handguard, which is a very solid mount for 3 points of contact, you have an incredibly stable platform that then allows you to mount optics directly on the dust cover right here, and that essentially opens up the opportunity for the AK to be modernized, to use modern optics such as the LCAN Spectre here. My military guys out there are like, LCAN's not modern, or low power variable optics, or red dots further back on the rifle. It just allows for a more ergonomic setup with no punishment as far as the reliability or longevity of the weapon. In fact, this is a much stronger piece than the typical dust cover that you have on your AKs. So in every way, the Zenitco, in my mind, is as much part of the AK-105 lineage and kind of sharp looks as the original 105 from the factory was. I feel like the Zenitco just goes right with it. Now, it should be noted as well that a lot of people ask me this question, can you still use front sight posts? Yeah, absolutely. The iron sights are still completely usable with these Zenitco parts. So you can see the front sight post right here, of course our rear sight. Now, in the case of my stock, it is of course configured higher up. That way I can look through this optic. But if you drop that down, you can still see straight through the iron sights, or if you can't hit the rifle a bunch, you can still see through them. But the point is, it's all still usable. There's no, there's nothing bad about the system at all. It's all good. I don't really see a whole lot of cons. Besides, you do add a little bit of weight to it, but in my opinion, the weight is balanced quite well as being necessary to increase the function of the weapon. Now, of course, you do have proprietary mounts with the Zenitco stuff, so that should be noted, and that is a little bit of an ass pain, but I understand them not using our stuff. They want to develop their own, and more power to them. Now, the front end is, of course, what makes the AK-105 the 105, the short 12.4-inch barrel and everything that we have going on. Going back from there, we have essentially just a normal AK-100 series or an AK-74M type build. So we, of course, have our magazines. This is a Bulgarian magazine. They have been absolutely wonderful in terms of reliability and all that kind of stuff. One thing that you have to say about the AK-74 magazine design is it is incredibly robust and works incredibly well. So of course, any of our AK-74 type mags will work. We have a Plum mag right here, which is a Russian. You can still see the ink stamps on it. Of course, those two belong together. So we have our Plum mag right there, and then of course, even more, as I hit my nose right there, even more modern, we have the AK-12 mag, which of course fits in. So any of your normal AK-74 type magazines fit, no problem. And the rocking mechanism of locking the magazine in is of course a little bit more troublesome than an AR. But at the same time, the system is very strong and robust in the fact that it can withstand a lot of different environments. For example, freezing, which is, as we know, a problem in Soviet Russia. Well, no longer Soviet. But the point is that the magazine design, a little bit more cumbersome than AR, but very necessary for the environments that they found themselves in. Now from there, of course, we have a charging handle. Now in this case, on this particular weapon, we do have the Zenitco charging handle, which mounts over that one. Some people like it, some people don't. My dad, Haley Strategic, of course, does not, but I enjoy it quite a bit. Now, yeah, if you're really paying attention, you probably saw a little bit of oil fly off of there. This weapon was just in the cold weather test. It was just completely cleaned and re-oiled, so she's a little bit wet right now. But in any case, I really like the Zenitco charging handle. I think it really increases the ergonomics of the weapon. Tarkov reference. In any case, well done. We have an enhanced safety on this AK. That way, when we're on the weapon, it's much easier to bring that safety off, because it used to be that you have to reach your hand around, sweep down in order to get that safety off. With this enhanced one, we can simply operate it with our trigger finger, and it is much quicker and mo better. Of course, we can't talk about it without getting into it, but we do have a non-factory trigger in this guy. We do have an ALG trigger. So the ALG trigger was fitted by Jim Fuller himself, and it is absolutely phenomenal. But in any case, we really have to test that because these are really phenomenal triggers. So pushing into it right there, we have just a teeny bit of play, and we hit our first wall. That lets off at about 3 pounds. Let's check the reset. Barely, about 2 millimeters forward. All right, we hit our reset right there. Pulling it from the reset. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. What a great trigger. ALG triggers are just really well made, and it should be noted, if you watch my old AK-12 review, At one point, I handle a really well-worn AK-74M, and when I pull the trigger on that guy, it just lets off super easy. It's a super great trigger. AK triggers, in my opinion, are quite nice as far as a combat trigger is concerned. So, you know, the ALG Trigger just improves upon that. Of course, we have our custom contoured grip from Jim Fuller himself. Some will say it looks like a testicle. In any case, it feels absolutely great. So we have that. Of course, it has that reduced grip angle that I like. I try not to complain about it too much, but this does feel really, really good. Up top here, we have an Elcan Spectre optic. And now moving back to the back here, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be asking about it, we have a Zenitco PT1 stock. These stocks are incredible because they're, of course, adjustable. You can easily adjust them out to where needed. And then, even better, and what is absolutely necessary for an AK, you have a cheek riser in order to put your cheek at the correct position to look through an optic. Because unfortunately, due to the operating mechanism of the AK, when we get our optics up, they are very high compared to the drop on the stock. This is necessary to ensure that we get a good cheek weld so that we can make accurate shots. Because on those older AK stocks, you know, let's see if we have one right here. Now in this case, we have an optic super low. But you can see if I'd had it on top of that dust cover, I'd have a cheek weld there, and that's not really good for good marksmanship, for good accuracy. It's also not very comfortable. So that increased cheek height right there on the PT1 is absolutely needed, and that is, of course, adjustable. A quick note for you guys, if you are going to be using these, I definitely do recommend absolutely cranking down on those screws with a flathead screwdriver to get those really cinched down, because they will walk out otherwise. It's made in Russia. It's going to be fine. Just crank down on it. You'll be okay. But in any case, that really brings us to the end of the AK-105. The AK-105 is, without a doubt, I think, the best variant of the AK family. It is handy. It still has the correct ballistics for those distances that you need. The recoil is soft and very manageable. And the weapon is just so damn reliable. Of every reliability test we've done, the AK-105 has consistently powered through, and so would the 74 as well. But they're made to run, man. They're made to run. They're made to be simplistic fighting rifles, and the addition of the Zenitco furniture to these and a good optic really increases the ability of this weapon to just be a very lethal fighting carbine. So I can really appreciate everywhere that they have come from as far as modernizing this weapon and making it better. Of course, that came from multiple sources. But in any case, as far as AKs go, I do consider the AK-105 to be among my favorites. I'm sure that's more of a personal preference thing as far as, you know, the caliber goes and all that type of stuff. It should be noted that these, of course, do come in 5.56. So we have a 5.56 version right here, the AK-102. This one was as well built by Jim Fuller. This is an Arsenal build, which is Bulgarian, but same concept. For all intents and purposes, the same weapon, except in 5.56, and just as reliable as has been seen in the cold weather test. So that brings us to the end, guys. If you can get an AK-105, highly recommend it. I know that PSA is bringing them about. We are redoing a review on the PSA AK-74, so everything seems to be going well. So I'm interested to see how those go, and especially to review a PSA AK-105 as they come out, because, again, it is my favorite weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on a little journey with me. We have way more crazy stuff coming. Make sure you stay tuned. But, I mean, the thing about it is, like, as cool as this rifle is right here, fact of the matter is that if you don't know what you're doing, this weapon's still going to suck. So make sure that you get out there, you get training, you become deadly with this. Tons of great guys to get training from, guys. Tony Cowden, Pat McNamara, Cogworks, Bear Solutions, Haley Strategic, probably my dad, maybe not. Get out there, take these classes, become more deadly. And as always, guys, I've got nothing else for you. Final thing for you guys. Kindness. Touched upon it quite a few times, but I think it's really important to be kind to each other and to be kind to your neighbor, to whomever. Kindness is something that's often forgotten in this world, so take a moment, be kind to somebody, and make this world a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I've got nothing else for you.